morning, everybody. Today is June 10th, 2025. It is 10 a.m. and this is the governing board meeting of the St. Johns River Water Management District. I'm going to call that meeting to order, and if we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As is custom, we're going to start with the roll call. Our Vice Chair, Ms. Gabby White.
Present.
Mr. Oliver. Mr. Peterson. Mr. Atwood. I'm going to call that meeting to order, and if we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Bornique. Mr. House. Good morning. Ms. Price. And General Burnett, I believe, is going to potentially join us in a few minutes, as I understand it. We're going to start with the roll call. Our Vice Chair. He is excused in the interim. Mr. Oliver. And we hope that he's able to join us. Everything's fine with General Burnett, but I know that he's doing his best to be able to join us. All right. Our first item is, as always, as is customary, again, Robin Hudson with our employee awards. You're recognized. Mr. House.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Robin Hudson, Human Resources Director.
Good morning. Ms. Price. And General.
I would like to congratulate Grace Clements, the June Employee of the Month. Grace is a Grace is a Regulatory Scientist 3 and is recognized for exemplifying the district's core values of building trust and developing partnerships. Grace has established herself as a dedicated and skilled professional. Her positive attitude, strong communication skills, and commitment to excellence have earned the trust of colleagues, supervisors, and external stakeholders alike. Grace takes on challenging assignments, including wetland delineations, mitigation bank support, and regulatory conservation easement work. Thank you, Grace, for all you do. A 10-year service award for Heather Barber, Budget Director in the Office of Financial Services. Heather is responsible for the development of the district's preliminary and annual budgets, performance monitoring, and facilitating budgetary changes in compliance with all statutes, policies, and procedures. Heather's increasing level of responsibilities are a direct result of her strong work ethic, attention to detail, and producing accurate records. She is never limited by her job description and always looks for ways to improve and serve the district. Heather has initiated several processes to automate the massive spreadsheets required for budget development and executive reporting. She is noted for building strong partnerships, sharing her knowledge, and collaborating with customers to help them successfully navigate the complex budget process. Heather holds a Certified Government Finance Officer's designation. Thank you for 10 years of service to the district. A 25-year service award to Nikki Clemens, Payroll Supervisor in the Office of Financial Services. Nikki is responsible for the accurate processing of the biweekly payroll and all payroll-related functions. She partners with human resources and employees to ensure information is accurate and payroll is processed with complete precision. Nikki led the significant effort to make all aspects of the payroll process 100% electronic. She has played a critical role in the implementation of complex payroll rules and regulations to ensure compliance and efficiency. Nikki was a key employee in 2 major payroll system implementations with her attention to detail and payroll expertise, leading to successful outcomes. Nikki has received 2 Meritorious Service Awards, the Finance Employee of the Quarter, and the Employee of the Month Award. Nikki exemplifies the qualities of trust, professionalism, confidentiality, and accountability in all of her work. Nikki, congratulations on 25 years of outstanding service to the district. A 25-year service award to Marianella Pachinko, Senior Regulatory Information Specialist in the Office of Records and Regulatory Support. Marianella plays an important role in both records and regulatory support and the Division of Regulatory Services, with compliance being her specialty. Her responsibilities include the review and issuance of CUP and ERP permit transfers and as-built certification review. Her duties keep her involved with permittees, consulting engineers, regulatory, and legal staff. She has worked on several different water well completion projects and is a key player working on several compliance projects over the last 3 years. She always has a can-do attitude and is regularly reaching out to assist others, not only on her team, but she also eagerly helps her coworkers in the Apopka Service Center as well. Marinella was presented with a well-deserved Employee of the Month award. We greatly appreciate your contributions to the district, and we congratulate you on 25 years of service. And a retirement award for Lori Berklew, Regional Water Supply Planning Coordinator in the Bureau of Water Supply Planning. Lori's career with the district spans nearly 3 decades. She started her career as a consumptive use permit reviewer. Recognizing her value, she was asked to help guide the newly created Central Florida Water Initiative team, leading them through the complex technical and regulatory assessments to build a program that would protect Central Florida's natural resources and provide for future water supplies. She was later selected to lead the North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership, where she keenly built relationships with stakeholders that identified solutions to meet the region's water supply needs while addressing impacts to flows at Itchitucknee and other outstanding Florida springs. The district is blessed to have such a talented and dedicated staff member to represent us and mentor so many of our staff. It is without a doubt that Lori's positive impact will continue to benefit the district long after her retirement. Lori, congratulations on your retirement, and thank you for many years of dedicated and exceptional service.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you all for all you've done for the people of the state of Florida, for our district. Really, really much appreciated. Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the hydrologic conditions report. Tim Miller is going to make that presentation. You're recognized, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Bradley and members of the Governing Board. I'm Tim Miller, Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Water Resource Information, presenting the June Hydrologic Conditions Report, representing data from the month of May. Beginning first with rainfall, precipitation in May was received at the beginning and the end of the month with dry conditions in between, and amounts were highly varied across the district. As you can see on the map, the area around the I-4 corridor, including Seminole, Orange, and portions of Volusia and northern Brevard counties, recorded the highest amounts, with some localized areas receiving over 12 inches. The average total across the district was above the district-wide monthly average by just over 2.5 inches. 16 of 18 counties were above normal, with 5 counties more than 3 inches above their averages. Alachua and Indian River counties were the only counties below normal, and both were within an inch of their averages. Countywide average rainfall totals range from a high of 10.07 inches for Seminole County to a low of 3.04 inches for Alachua County. Next, in reviewing rainfall over the past 12 months, the district-wide annual rainfall total is 2.28 inches above the annual average of just over 51 inches. Rainfall distribution on an annual scale continues to have been higher in central and northern counties through the year, while areas along the southern coast and to the west have received less. 10 counties are above normal, with 5 counties more than 5 inches above their annual averages, including Nassau, Duval, Volusia, Seminole, and Orange counties. Of the 8 counties below their 12-month averages, 2 counties were more than 3 inches below normal, and that includes Alachua and Baker counties. County-wide totals ranged from the lowest value of 46.61 inches for Alachua County to the highest value of 64.24 inches for Seminole County, which is more than 12 inches above its average. Moving on to surface flows, we look at monthly mean surface flows across the district through May. Surface flows at the majority of sites have shown increases of varying levels from the previous month in response to increased precipitation. In the Middle Basin, examples of increases include the St. Johns River near DeLand and St. Johns River near Geneva sites, where flow increases of nearly double were recorded, moving those sites into the average range. And the Econ River near Chuliota site had the greatest percentile increase, which moved it into the high range, indicated in the light blue. With respect to the Wekiva River near Sanford site, when staff created this map, the provisional USGS data indicated that flow was in the very low range. However, USGS staff completed a field visit yesterday, and as a result, a correction was made to their provisional data, which indicates flow conditions were instead in the average range through May. Sites in the Ocklawaha Basin to the west and the lower St. Johns River Basin to the north were in the average range as well. In the next series of slides, we'll review the status of water levels at selected long-term lake sites. Lake levels have had a mixture of increases and decreases through the month. Looking first at Lake Brooklyn, the water level decreased by a foot over the previous month, remaining above average. Lake Weir had a decrease of 0.2 of a foot in May, continuing to be below the average water level. Water level at Lake Winnimisset had variability through the month, but increased 0.2 of a foot and remains above the average level for this time of year. Lake Apopka's level increased 0.3 of a foot from the previous month and is now above its average and nearing its regulation schedule. Water level in Blue Cypress Lake decreased 0.4 of a foot in May. Levels continued to be above average but below regulation schedule at this location. Lake Weir had a decrease of 0.2 of a foot in May. Conditions in the upper Floridan aquifer have shown decreases in water levels across most of the district, with about 80% of sites recording declines. However, the majority of the district, about 60%, remains in the normal range. There were a few locations with increases of greater than 10 percentile points, but as you can see, shown by the red triangles, approximately 30% of well sites recorded percentile decreases of greater than 10 in May. Movement into the very low range was observed across portions of counties located in our southern region, including Brevard, Osceola, and Indian River counties, and smaller areas of very low conditions in Duval and St. Johns counties, as identified in orange on the map, had slight expansion from last month. Even with these changes, the aquifer continues to exhibit resiliency, largely due to the high aquifer levels experienced in the months that followed the record precipitation received during our 2024 tropical season. Next, looking at the district-wide index value for aquifer conditions, we see that the upper Floridan aquifer well index value at the end of May was 48, which is remaining in the normal range. Although trending lower in prior months, aquifer levels have been more stable through May and are doing well relative to this time of year as we move out of our dry months and appear to have started convective weather patterns common during our expected summer wet season. In the next series of slides, I review changes in flow at selected spring sites with long-term monitoring. As you'll see, declines in flow were observed at most springs. The monthly mean for flow in Silver Springs decreased 56 cubic feet per second from the previous monthly mean, and flow is just within the normal range. At Blue Spring, the monthly mean showed a slight increase in May, ending the month in the high range. These provisional data continue to indicate a fair amount of variability, some which may be attributed to ongoing construction activities at the spring, which have had intermittent impacts to velocity meter data. Potential data anomalies will continue to be addressed by our partners at the USGS as they work through their data QA process. At Rock Springs, flow had a slight decrease from the previous monthly mean and remains in the high range. A slight decrease in flow was also observed in the monthly mean at Wekiva Springs. Flow continues to be in the normal range for this time of the year. The well plugging program was able to complete the abandonment of 9 wells in May. Through these efforts, the abandonment of those wells provided an additional savings of over 500,000 gallons per day. And since November 2020, the program has now plugged just over 700 wells, which equates to more than 86 million gallons of water saved each day. At Rock Springs, flow had a slight decrease from the previous month. Although we've seen an improvement from last month due to increased rainfall, the next few slides relate to dry conditions that have persisted in spite of recent shifts towards our more typical convective thunderstorm patterns. Updated each week, this is the most recently published U.S. Drought Monitor assessment with data from June 3rd. As you can see, with the exception of central counties, including Seminole and Orange counties, and Nassau County to the north, most areas within the district boundary were at minimum classified as abnormally dry, as indicated in yellow. Moderate and severe drought conditions, as illustrated by the tan and orange colors, were experienced by several counties and included the Tri-County Ag area. As you can see, varying degrees of drought were also being experienced outside our district across the state, especially to the southwest. And again, a caveat, recent rains in June are anticipated to bring change to this map when the update is released later this week. As you can see, with the exception of central... Lastly, this is the Keach-Byram Drought Index map for Florida, which is updated daily, and these values are from yesterday. Designed specifically for the assessment of wildfire potential, this helps to identify counties which are experiencing a heightened risk for wildfire. And reflecting recent rains, most of the counties within our district have an index value below 500, and none of our counties have county enacted burn bans in place at this time. However, there are a few counties outside our district to the southwest and west which do have active burn bans in place. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Miller?
Lastly, this is the Keach-Byram Drought Index map for Florida, which is updated daily.
All right, want to let the record reflect that General Burnett is here, and we have a full house of, we have a quorum, and everybody is present. All right, we're going to move on to our next, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, which is consideration of the consent agenda. That's items 10 through 15 on the posted agenda. Do any board members wish to pull any of those items for discussion? All right, I see no one asking to pull the items. Doug Bornick has made a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? All right, we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. All right, we're going to move to item 4, which is, we all love our lakes, and we appreciate them. We appreciate them so much that we're going to do a proclamation declaring this month Lakes Appreciation Month. And with that, Eric, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The North American Lake Management Society designates each July as Lakes Appreciation Month in recognition of the importance lakes bring to each of us. This importance reflects a number of important values of open space, recreation, and ecological service such as water treatment, aquifer recharge, and flood attenuation. So I'm going to take you on a brief tour of some beautiful lakes around the district. We'll begin with Lake Lowry on Camp Landing. Next, on the right, we see Blue Cypress Lake, which is the headwaters of the St. Johns River in the far southern part of our district. A little bit north of there is Buck Lake, one of the large floodplain lakes in the northern part of our upper basin. Next is a tranquil day on Lake Apopka. On the left here, you see Lake George, the second largest lake in the state of Florida, and Lake Harris, one of the pearls in the Ocklawaha chain of lakes. Next to Lake Apopka, where the district has invested a lot of resources in improving the water quality and conditions on that lake, and that's reflected here in increasingly good catches, both from tournaments and people just going out fishing. And you'll see Jim Peterson, who says that bass just jumped in his lake while in the boat while he was doing plant surveys. In the Middle Basin, we have 3 large lakes, including Lake Jessup. This is a tranquil morning on Lake Jessup. Here's Lake Lochloosa in Alachua County, part of the Orange Creek Basin lakes. Some other cypress fringe lakes, Noonan's Lake, also in Alachua County, and Lake Diston in Flagler County. Some lakes of importance to us from a project perspective are Lake Brooklyn and Lowry. And finally, I want to end with a drone video of Lake Monroe. So we heard that the submerged aquatic vegetation on Lake Monroe was recovering, so we went out and did a tour, and what you're seeing is on the eastern shoreline of the lake. One of the benefits of the dry spring we've had is lower than typical water levels, so more light has reached the bottom of the lake along its fringe, and that has allowed enough light for the Valsinaria, a native eelgrass, native species, to come back very quickly, and now we have this really impressive meadow all along the eastern shoreline of the lake, and it's very large patches along the southern and northern areas. So this shows that when the conditions are right, these plants that are there, sometimes they're heavily grazed, but under conditions where they get enough light, they can rebound very quickly. So we're happy to see that recovery.
Eric, if I could interrupt you there, because we've heard a lot of, I have an opportunity to come into contact with both just citizens as well as people who are advocates in the environmental community. And this issue of SAV is very important. I describe it as kind of a hot issue.
Yep.
In the world. And there is a tendency to, assume because there's been such growth in our state, which has an impact on water supply and water in general, that the challenges that we see in various parts of our district with regards to submerged aquatic vegetation is all our fault, and we're not doing enough to fix it, this problem. And I for one welcome critiques and welcome science-based discussion of these matters. I mean, I think that's why this district, part of an important reason why this district exists, and we should be open and transparent and have these discussions. But what I hear you saying here, and this is something I've heard in a couple of other cases, is that sometimes it's as simple as the water level is too high, and when you have like tanned water or water that's darker than clear water, that the light's just not getting to the plants and photosynthesis doesn't occur and the plant doesn't grow. And so it's just a function of the water being higher. And that could have happened in 1820 as much as it could happen in 2025. Is that, am I off base sort of in my observations that while that's not these are complicated matters, that's something that we need to be mindful of?
No, I think you've nailed it quite well. I think there are places in our district where submerged vegetation is impaired due to nutrient enrichment.
Right.
Lake Apopka, the Indian River Lagoon, where our goal has been to reduce that enrichment so there's less algae in the water, so more light gets to the bottom. In cases like this, it's really a natural feature of water levels, and one of the issues with water levels along the St. Johns is when the water levels come up, they inundate the floodplain, and that brings in the natural tannin color into the water. So when the water's up, it's darker. When it drops, it's clearer. And so during these drier periods, we not only get shallower water, but it's clearer water, which allows more light to get to the bottom. The certainly public concern since 2017 and Irma is a real thing. And I'll say that some of the folks in environmental sciences and FWC are very close to releasing a report where they've looked at our transit data on submerged aquatic vegetation, our hydrologic data, our water quality data, and FWC's data on a variety of grazers in the system. And what it is showing is that conditions since Irma in 2017, we've just had higher water levels with deeper water that have really been impacting the ability of the vegetation to recover. Until you get to about Green Cove Spring, and that's where salinity begins to have an effect as well. So we hope to have that report out, I'm hoping within a week. But no, it's an important question, and that's one of the reasons we've gone and looked at what our data can suggest about patterns.
And one of the reasons, you know, I was tongue-in-cheek talking about our proclamations earlier, but this is serious stuff. We truly, this is what we do. We love our water bodies, and one of the reasons you have these recognition months is to start discussions like we're having right now, right? So thank you for bringing up this, and then we're going to have other parts of your presentation as well, and that's why we do these things, is to highlight these important aspects of our area. You're recognized, Mr. Bernique.
Yeah, hey, Eric. This is not what I planned to do or say, but I just happened to be in Mount Dora for a special occasion, and we stayed at an old-time hotel that's there. And I was up early in the morning, and I noted that the crew that works for the hotel were putting out about I'd say 100 bags of cow manure on their lawn that drains directly down that hill from that old-time hotel right into the lake. And I talked to him about it, and the crew that was there, and I asked it, you know, can't you use something more environmentally friendly than cow manure? And it occurred to me, I'm sure that you've had programs, but a program highlighting all the lakes owners around the fringes that have businesses to consider a more environmentally friendly way to fertilize their plants and lawns. But you know, the cow manure, I've used it, and I don't use it anymore, and I don't live on the water, but it turns your grass green, but it turns your lake green as well. So I was thinking as I drove out of Mount Dora, and a very good restaurant there, by the way, I was thinking, was wondering if we had a program to highlight that to start with, just the immediate waterfront owners of lawns and all the big homes that are on the lakes to say, hey, we're glad you're on the lake, but use this, not that.
We in the counties, our partners in local governments, that's a constant communication message. With an old hotel, you'd think they would understand that, but with the number of new people moving to Florida, it is,
right.
There's, you know, the need for communicating how to protect what attracted you here in the first place.
Sure.
is always there.
Yeah, this hotel's been there forever. I think you know the hotel. So I was amazed at what I saw. You know, and it goes right into that lake. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Go ahead.
Well, that leads me to my last slide, is requesting you approve a proclamation declaring July 2025 as Lakes Appreciation Month, inviting you to come down and sign the proclamation and have a picture taken.
Before we go to the ceremony, does anybody else on the board have any comments or questions of Eric or any other matter concerning our lakes? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Is there any? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved unanimously. All right, we're going to move to item number 5, which is consideration of matters regarding C10. Gretchen Kelly is going to handle the presentation. You're recognized, Ms. Kelly.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Gretchen Kelly. I'm a project manager with the Bureau of District Projects and Construction. This item is for your consideration of the district's formal solicitation to procure an engineering firm for the C10 Water Management Area project. First, this slide is intended to provide a little history behind what spawns C10 Water Management Area and other district projects. LiDAR data is shown in the map to the right. Higher ground surface elevations and a natural ridge are indicated in red. Historically, lands east of the ridge drain to the Indian River Lagoon and lands west to the St. Johns River. However, several man-made canals were dug across that ridge in the early to mid-1900s, which artificially drained portions of the upper St. Johns River Basin to the IRL. The district's rediversion efforts shown on the left aim to correct this unnatural drainage. C10 WMA is a very similar in concept to the Crane Creek M1 Canal Flow Restoration Project that Dale Jenkins will update you on in a bit. Both projects were identified in the 2017 IRL feasibility study as flow rediversion projects with significant water quality benefits to the IRL and hydrologic restoration to the St. Johns River. About a decade prior to the Crane Creek M1 project, the district built C1 Sawgrass Lake, WMA, also known as the C1 Rediversion Project. C10 WMA is actually phase 2 to that project. And the yellow star here on the map shows the approximate location of C10. And moving further south, the district continues to expand water storage near C50 or near Fellsmere to reduce discharges through the federal C54 canal. And here's a closer look at the existing C1 Sawgrass Lake, WMA, and C10 project. The C10 project will include a pump station and a 1,300-acre WMA. Stormwater will be pumped from nearby canals into the WMA for treatment before rediverting that water back to the St. Johns River. C10 WMA will provide multiple benefits to the district's core missions, as indicated at the top right of your screen. Estimated Water quality and quantity benefits are also shown here and are pretty impressive. Together, C1 Sawgrass Lake and C10 WMA are anticipated to return roughly 50% of surface water flows in the C1 canal back to the St. Johns River where the land historically drained. District staff previously completed some design work on the C10 project, which included a high-hazard earthen dam that formed the WMA. However, due to changes in available staff resources and with the ongoing development of industry standards for dam safety, the district elected to procure an engineering firm to take on the design and assume engineering record responsibilities. We posted this RFQ for 45 days and held a non-mandatory pre-proposal meeting during that time. Minimum qualifications are shown on the right of your screen. The requirement for similar projects included mandatory experience in design and permitting of a high-hazard dam and a large water resource development project and related construction management services. We've received 2 responses to this RFQ, and both met minimum qualifications. The evaluation committee consisted of 4 district staff. Written qualifications and oral presentations were evaluated based on the criteria detailed in your governing board memo. While both respondents are very, very well qualified and highly regarded firms, the committee ranked Atkins Realis USA the highest. And thank you to the folks with Atkins who were able to join us today. We appreciate that. And this brings me to the recommendation. With your approval, this will be a work order-based contract, and supplemental work allowance will be included in the budget that you see here. That SWA amount will be negotiated during contract negotiations. Last but not least, I also want to recognize and thank Florida Department of Environmental Protection and Brevard County through their Savor Indian River Lagoon program for partnering with us and contributing funds towards the design and construction of this important project. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, we're going to start with questions, and then we're going to have a time for comments as well. Any questions? You recognize, Madam Vice Chair.
Gretchen, I think I have 3 or 4 questions. In general, when I see only 2 respondents, I don't agree that we have done everything possible to get more competition. When I reviewed the documents, I realized that there were 20 people showed up for the preliminary discussion and only 2 submitted. When you look at the item that we just approved on consent agenda for survey, it was $350,000. And you had 14 respondents for $350,000. For $8.5 million, we should have more responses. I'm going to vote for this. However, I will tell you that I think it's a conversation I had with Mr. Register. There's a lot of creative ways now that contracting gets done, and we should be talking with our sister agency like DOT, because that's what they were dealing with that, and they overcome that. So I think having only 2, and then plus you have the maximum points is 40. And usually firms get these contracts on 0.25 or maybe 1 point or 2 points. Your number 1 firm is about 5.5 points from 40 points. So that tells me there's a bunch of things that wasn't right, but yet this is what we got, so we are going with, what is offered to us. I work with Atkins, and they are a great firm. That's not part of the discussion. I think the way we are doing, we need to revisit, and it's something that Mr. Register and I have been talking, and I think I would like Mike to bring back to the board about how we are doing it and the proposed ideas, so we can get our arms around it. Thank you, sir.
All right, well, Madam Vice Chair, I know this is your area, that this is an area of expertise that you have in your professional life, which is one of the things about being board members is we all bring whatever our professional experiences are to bear to try to assist collectively in the performance of the district, right? And so when you bring these concerns, something that I know I personally take very seriously, and we all do. And so what I look forward to is your whatever the fruitful discussions you have with Mr. Register, that you share those potential improvements and ideas with the board when you feel like it's time for us to go in that direction. All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions other than our vice chair? Okay. Mr. House, you're recognized.
I, I think that it would be better for us to move forward with it, if at all possible. And we can work on that with Ms. Giabi about what we can do to improve procurement in the future so that we get more along those lines. But as far as this project schedule and where we're trying to go, I feel like moving forward with it would be the best.
Yes, sir, thank you.
All right. Oh, of course. Anybody else have any questions or comments at this time? We're going to have another opportunity before we bring this in for landing. Anyone?
I'd like to make the motion to approve.
Okay, 1 second first, if you don't mind. Ms. Winkler, do we have any public comment cards for this agenda item?
No, sir.
Okay. That being said, is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the requested action on agenda item 5. Is there a discussion on that motion and second? Seeing none, I'm going to do a roll. Yeah, take your time, Mr. House. You're recognized. Yeah, I feel like whoever the consultant ultimately is going to do okay. I would tend to agree with that. Good point, Mr. House. All right, any other discussion? All right, I'm going to do a roll call vote. This is an important project for the district. This is something that we take these things very seriously. Let me just say that we don't talk to each other, the board members, because of there's a Florida sunshine law that precludes that. But whenever things of this magnitude come up, I'll speak for myself. I take great care and concern to talk to Mr. Register and his staff about what has happened. My initial reaction was similar in that, I would, with a project of this size, I would love to see, a lot of robust competition and all that. And to your point about, the 20 people show up, and then, let's get down to this. And while we can always do things better, what I ultimately came to the conclusion of is that we're at a fork in the road. And if we chose the fork of not moving forward, that would probably put us in a worse position than if we chose the fork of moving forward on this, because you don't want to send the message out to the consultant community that we're kind of messing around, not serious about moving forward. Because if we were to close it down and reopen it, that could have ripple effects that are not getting us in a stronger position, right? But that all being said, we're all very serious about making sure that in projects, particularly of this size, that we have robust competition. And what we have seen is that, particularly with a lot of the money heading towards a lot of the projects in South Florida, and it's not just transportation projects, but these environmental projects, it is not a buyer's market, us being the buyer. It's a seller's market. There's a lot of money, the government has put a lot of money in the system, whether it be DC or Tallahassee, and there's a lot of projects going on at the same time. And I think what we're really seeing at the end of the day is a function of the marketplace, which is life, which is we're spending a lot of money as governments right now. A lot of it, I mean, that's not a bad thing. It's good for the economy, but more importantly, if you're spending it right, you're doing things that are probably long overdue, such as this, that need to be done to make sure in a growing state that we're doing things appropriately to have infrastructure in place to meet our needs now and into the future. And that's the main reason why you're seeing so much money being spent right now. So I put all that into the hopper. This is Rob Bradley talking, right? And I conclude that it's appropriate to move forward in this matter, but everybody has their own internal discussions. And again, we don't talk about it until we get here, right? With that, Mr. Bornick.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think you get up in an airplane, you see the boom that's going on in Florida. If you look from where I live south, the companies that would be normally interested are busier than a 1-hour paper hanger in a subway rush. So it's just the way the world is. They have a lot of business, and something like this, that they'd rather work with the private side. Going with the government side is a little difficult. And the guys I know, 2 of them I play golf with, they can't hire enough crew fast enough to do what they're doing in South Florida. And normally they'd be interested, but business is so damn good. They're doing the private side. So, but you're right, Mr. Chairman. That's exactly the reason.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, you're recognized, Mr. Oliver.
At the risk of being in an echo chamber, I agree with, both of you all. With the vice chair here, I always appreciate any improvement we can make into the process to try to solicit more bids and drive the competition. The size and scope of this project may have been somewhat of a limiting factor. There's just not that many people out there that can do the type of specialized work we're looking for here. But it is, to the chair's point, it is not a buyer's market out there right now. So we're at risk of delaying this project and maybe getting some more bids in versus moving forward with the process as we started with. So that's why I was in favor of moving forward now.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I don't see much evidence that even if our processes, which I think can be always improved, and your comments are well taken, I'm not sure that the ultimate result would end up with us in any different place, is the bottom line. And that's kind of where I am, Mr. Oliver, too. And you're exactly right. I think it's important. You brought up a point that resonated with me, which is this is a very, very specialty. There's not many people in the world that do this. This one, one of the reasons why some of these smaller, there's a lot of people that do survey work, but anyway, that being said, we can always be better. You're recognized, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. I agree with everything everyone said, but for the last 100 years, we are building dams, roads. So as complex as it appears, a lot of people do this sort of work, and we can find competition. But my issue is, if the consultant wants it so bad, why is it that 5.5 point? Atkins knows better. If it's a 40 that you can get 40, you need to be 39.75. So I don't like for consultant, and I'm a consultant, and I work on billions of dollars of worth of complex project, but it still is building roads. We've done it, and I think it's a theory that we keep thinking that the market is so great that nobody's interested. Believe me, if we relook our process, I can promise you, you're going to have a whole lot more interest. If 20 people showed up, let's say half of them would be submitting for this. If 20 people are interested in $8.5 million project, 10 versus 2 and the two that really, really, really didn't work that hard to impress us. So, and like I said, the Atkins and Gannett Fleming, they both are my friends and they both are great firms. I like to see a better competition. I like to see for them work really hard. Our projects are important to us. It's important for our district. So with that, I think we have a motion second. So.
Sure. And I'll tell you, I'm here to have a free-flowing discussion because we can't have these discussions offline. I hear what you're saying. But you think we should move forward?
I was really 50-50 and couldn't wait
Right.
to bring it up. I
Right.
don't want to see delay.
Right.
I don't want our project to suffer. And so let's put it this way, I'm settling,
Right. So you're like at 60 instead of 50, but
today,
you wish you were 880.
I wanted it to be, I really, really wanted
Right.
it to be 80. And
Right.
Mike knows, and after
Yeah.
talking here, is that, do I really want to see a delay on our project? I really don't. So I'm not even at 60, 55. I'm
Right.
just a little upset that consultant world is not taking us serious. And I have a problem with $8.5 million. That's pretty darn good fee.
It's a major project.
Yeah.
And your comments, give me pause, but not pause enough to stop.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Kind of how I view the matter, to
Yeah.
be honest with you.
So, Mr. Chairman, the Atkins team are here, and I'm sure we can have their commitment to do a bang-up job for us.
Great. All right, I'm going to do a roll call vote on this matter. Galby White,
Yes.
Oliver,
Yes.
Peterson, Atwood, Bornique,
Yes, sir.
Burnett, House, Price,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you, sir.
We take our job seriously, as you know, if you watch any of our meetings, and we treat these dollars like they're our own because they are ours too. We're all taxpayers, and our staff does too, and we always are open to trying to make sure that we continue to strive to make sure that those are spent appropriately and accordingly with what the expectations are of all the folks that pay their taxes and make sure that, and expect us to do our jobs. And we will continue to do that. All right, item 6, update on Central Florida Water Initiative Planning Region MFLs in the Wekiva Basin. Ms. Winkler.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the governing board. And I apologize if I go for the water. My allergies have gotten the best of me today, so I apologize in advance. This month and next month, we've scheduled a couple of presentations as requested by the chair and members of the board to talk about MFLs and also consumptive use permitting. So we'll setting up a series of presentations. And before I kind of get into the weeds of it, just wanted to provide some context on Florida water law. It really started in the late 60s, and then in 1970 and 71, the state of Florida had a very significant drought. And so much so, and I brought with me an article from 1971 from the New York Times. It actually made national news, but about cutting water use in South Florida. The drought was so severe. And in response to that, the Florida legislature in 1972 was looking for solutions. And as luck would have it, the dean of the University of Florida Law School, along with some associates, had recently in the late 60s done a survey of water law across the United States, looking at the Western water law and Eastern. And basically on that developed a model water code. They tried to take the best of both. And with that, the legislature took that model water code, made a couple of adjustments, and that became what has governed us over the last 50 years. And it really is the foundation of Chapter 373, which is our document. All the water management districts, Chapter 373 is our part of the Florida statutes. And so foundationally, what that model water code did is it said two things of real importance. It said, if you're going to issue consumptive use permits or allocate water for beneficial uses like public supply and agriculture and institutional and commercial uses, there also needs to be a system and a complementary regulation for protecting the water resources of the state. And that really is what we do with our MFL program. So today I'm going to talk to you about MFLs. This month we'll talk about the other prong, consumptive use permits next month. We're going to do a deep dive into the Wekiva Basin MFLs and how those MFLs relate to the Central Florida Water Initiative and our work there and the water supply plan and the supplemental rule. Then we're going to touch on prevention recovery strategies, and then project development that's ongoing now and our path forward. Why do we set MFLs? Well, again, if we're going to issue and allocate permits through consumptive use permitting program, we also want to protect the resource. And MFLs are basically a limit at which the further withdrawals would be significantly harmful to the resources or ecology of the area. When we're setting minimum flows or levels, flows typically for rivers or springs, levels for lake systems, we're looking at these 10 water resource values. And these water resource values are listed in what is called the Water Resource Implementation Rule. That is part of what DEP adopts as part of its guidance to the districts. And these water resource values range from recreation to water quality, maintenance of freshwater storage, so variety of issues that water resource implementation rule requires us to consider. But what do those words mean in the real world? This is what we actually look at in the field. So when we're looking at the floodplain of the system, we might be looking at the organic soils, how often the wetland is being inundated. In the channel or in the river spring, we might be looking at fish habitat, critical velocities, because you need a certain amount of speed in that water flow to make sure you're getting that algal scour. And then we're also looking at human uses. So those 10 words translates to this is what it looks like in the field. This is what we're really looking at. As part of our MFL assessment process, what we do is we look at those most critical environmental features. So in one system, it might be we need to make sure that that floodplain, those wetlands are inundated. Otherwise, we'll lose those organic soils. In some cases, that critical environmental value might be manatee refugia. We need to make sure the flows are adequate so that manatees have that winter refugia where they can go for that warmer water. So each MFL will have that most critical feature that needs to be protected. And what we call that is that MFL condition. That's where we want to make sure. That's the limit at which we don't want any more withdrawals for other uses. We also will do an assessment. We'll compare the current condition to that MFL condition to determine, do we have freeboard available that we could allow public supply or agriculture uses, basically reasonable beneficial uses that can use that available water. And rather than words, there's another way to look at this graphically. So that MFL condition is basically that flow regime that protects that critical environmental factor. And so that's the amount of water that we need for the environment. Above that MFL condition is what we would call freeboard, or what is available for public uses. So that's really, we're setting that new MFL condition. It's not exactly a point in time. That number, as we have the seasons, as you saw earlier with Tim, from winter to spring, summer, those lines, the up and down changes. But what we do is create an MFL condition, a safe yield for our water resources. Some of our MFL water bodies are also designated as outstanding Florida springs. St. Johns River Water Management District is home to 8 of them, and you can see them on the slide. That's the spring and their basin, that contributing area to the spring. And those were designated as part of the Florida Springs and Aquifer Protection Act of 2016. And today I'm going to be drilling down a little bit and talking more specifically about Rock and Wekiwa, which are located within the Central Florida Water Initiative area. The Wekiwa River Basin is the 3rd largest tributary to the St. Johns River, and you can see some statistics about it. Its watershed, and it's interesting in that it changes from a clear spring, and then we talked a little bit about Blackwater earlier with Dr. Martzoff, but it runs to the Blackwater River. So again, a fairly long channel down. And then there's numerous springs within the Wekiwa River Basin, some named and some unnamed. This area, this basin, has many designations, and this just indicates how cherished it is by the people who live in Central Florida, frankly, around the state. It has a National Wild and Scenic Rivers designation, Outstanding Florida Water. It contains area that's designated as a Florida Aquatic Preserve. So again, this is just an indication of how valued this resource is. We first adopted here at St. John's MFLs to protect these springs back in 1992. Periodically, in each November, we present to the governing board our list of MFLs that we plan to adopt over the course of the next few years. And we do what are called reevaluations. As data comes in, as our models improve and our understanding of these systems improve, we find it's important and necessary to update. And it's similar to what we did with Brooklyn and Geneva before we proceeded with our project development. We did a reevaluation of those MFLs. So this is something that we regularly do. In addition, we're adopting a new MFL in this basin, the Little Wekiwa River MFL, that we're hoping to provide additional protections, because there's some smaller springs in the area that can be manipulated with riser boards and things. So we want to make sure we're being as accurate as we can in protecting the resource. This just gives you a sense of the amount of data collection that went into developing these reevaluated MFLs. We had 13 ecological transects, 72 cross-sections for surface water models that were done, and you can see the list of information that was also collected and considered in the development of the MFL. I also wanted to make sure that there's a very significant relationship between spring flow and rainfall, and I think you kind of got a feel for that in Tim Miller's presentation earlier. And this just illustrates that relationship. During periods where there's rainfall above average, more spring flow, timeframes when we have below average rainfall, and you can see again that dry period in the 60s and 70s, again in the 80s, and another period in the 90s. We have those AMO, and some of you may have heard of that term, those Atlantic multi-decadal oscillations where you go through wet periods, then dry periods. So that definitely plays a role in spring flow. So I don't want to understate that. I want to make sure that while I'm talking about man's influence or human influence on the spring flow, rainfall does play a very vital role. I also wanted to make sure that it's clear that what we do in the MFL program is not drought proofing a spring. Droughts will continue to happen. That's part of nature. The flow is going to go above and below the MFL condition line, and that is part of nature. What we are trying to do is address the human consumption part and making sure that the human consumption part isn't significantly harming the spring. So I did want to make that point. Again, more recently, you can see the trend since 2014. That spring flow has been increasing. It goes up and down, but the trend is higher. And again, it's going to go up and down based on the season of the year and how much rainfall we're getting. And there's also some human influence, but generally positive trend. And the same with Rock Spring since 2014. So that just gives you a sense of where we are in time with these systems. One of the other critical components, in addition to the data that I just showed you that we look at, is we do use groundwater flow models, and wanted to let you know that since the start of CFWI, when we first started CFWI, we had a 10,000 square mile model. And what we've done with the more recent Central Florida Regional Water Supply plans is we've extended that domain of the model. And what that allows us to do is to see how much impact is coming from southern areas outside of our district or western areas outside of our district, because there's 3 water management districts that come together in the Central Florida area. So having that larger model domain has enabled us to really, for lack of a better word, see where impacts are coming from, and so that's helped us with our model or our MFL development. So in terms of bottom line for the MFLs, what we've determined is that under the current pumping condition, which is based on a 14 to 18 water use, and you may go, why 14 to 18? We use a 5-year period so we can catch some highs and lows. Since 14 to 18, there hasn't been a whole lot of change. Then again, numbers will go up and down slightly, but it's a fairly good estimate for where we are today. But what we're saying is we've kind of, on that graph, again, if you think back to the graph I showed earlier about that MFL condition, we're at that point where we don't want to go below that line. Don't want to trip into where we're hitting that what is needed for the resource. What this graph is also saying is that if we do nothing and we allow continued growth, in 2045, we would be operating below that line. We'd be in negative territory, and that's what we don't want to have happen. So we're in a recovery situation. So again, based on current condition, we're really bumping up against that MFL condition line. We don't want to go negative. We're right on that line. But if we do nothing and we don't find alternative water supplies or do projects, and with continued growth that would be anticipated, we would go below that line, which is what we don't want to have happen.
Could you go back to the slide where it was like 3 or 4? I don't want to jump too. I mean, I do.
That's okay.
But
the one with the MFL.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Keep going. I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Sorry.
Here we go.
Oh, sorry.
All right, right here. All right. So I guess I'm going to sound really dense when I ask these questions, but parts for my benefit, parts just to sort of suss this out for the public, and that is, okay, we have these minimum flow levels, and if you go to the previous slide, it says that it's basically the limit at which further withdrawals would be harmful. That's a very broad term, right? What does it mean to be harmful? In other words, I understand if a spring, like is a beautiful spring, go to the next one. If you
Yes, sir.
you go out to a spring and it's at a level, right? And obviously, if it's if I were to dive in to the beautiful spring and frolic around, and I could go to the bottom and go up, if it was half that, if it went from 10 feet to 5 feet, I couldn't do that anymore. That's a problem, I guess. So that's one evidence of the flow being less. The spring isn't as high. The water level in the spring isn't as high, correct?
So, yeah,
But it's got to be more than that, right?
correct.
What does the fact that it's 5 feet instead of 10 feet, does that then make more algal blooms? Does
for-
it do, you know?
Absolutely. So for example, in the case here, one of the issues is if we lose the flow, then the stage drops. And once the stage drop, you have organic soils basically open to the atmosphere. And so they start to subside. You would lose those soils. So that's an example. So it's not just about what is in the spring right there. It's also what we look at as that floodplain. So, most springs have some sort of channelization out to in this case, out to the St. Johns River. So what we do is transects along the way so that if those water levels drop, you might have loss of organic soils.
Because the water wouldn't be
it wouldn't be covering
going
the soil,
off into other areas that aren't just in front
the
of me.
floodplain along.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, there's one example.
Correct.
The
And-
floodplains around the spring would
Correct.
be affected because the water levels have gone down.
Exactly. And
What
that
would be another example?
Another example is some of our springs provide manatee refugia. So we want to make sure that there's enough water so that we can have enough area for manatees to congregate during the winter months. We also have some of our ones up in, I'm just thinking of MFLs up in Alachua County where we need a certain amount of habitat, depth of water to create habitat for certain species of birds. Brooklyn and Geneva, one of the factors was having fish habitat. So it's for each system. I've got folks from our MFL program here, but for each.
And they're chomping at the bit. Let me tell you.
Yeah. I'm
I
like-
get it. And,
but
we have some
but for
some control over the time. We'd be here all day. But anyway.
but for each system, we really do look at each system individually, and whether it's floodplain, whether it's species driven, each one is different, and that critical. And we test each of them. For each of them that might have floodplain, fish habitat, manatee refugia, we'll look at every one of them, and whichever one's the most constraining, that's the one that if we drop the level too low, that's the straw that's going to break that camel's back.
Well,
That's
let's
where
talk. I want to talk
pull it.
about one thing for a second. In what's now 20 years of public life, all that stuff you talked about, I get. I find it very critical. The thing that gets people fired up, that causes the social media to go crazy, and what people raise money on, what people do all this stuff, is the algal blooms, the algae blooms. That's when people get crazy. Not crazy. I get crazy. That's when people get upset and concerned. And that sounded like I was being critical. I get mad too. I get crazy. We all get crazy when we see something that this is beautiful water. You have the pictures from Mr. Moran that, we can see these things. It's not like nothing. And then all of a sudden there's just junk everywhere and it looks like guacamole on top, right? All right. Does this impact that? Does the MFLs impact whether that happens or doesn't happen?
So that is actually a different part of that statute that I mentioned earlier, the Florida Springs and Aquifer Protection Act. So that I look at that act as kind of two parts. One is dealing with what our jurisdiction is the water flow quantity. The other part of the act is DEP is charged with, which is more along the line of water quality. So thinking BMAPs, those basin management action plans, and regulating, how much of the watershed, what the nutrients going in. So the water quality part for these springs is dealt with by DEP more so. We consider some of it, but I'd say the big bulk of that is DEP, whereas we're the quantity folks. It's
Right.
simplistically how I
Well,
divide.
no, it's not. I mean, it's kind of important in its simplicity, because I get a lot of contact, and I'm sure my colleagues do, and I know staff does, and about those issues. And I'm not trying to give DEP more work or say, hey, it's actually them you need to. I'm just making sure the public understands who does what, and what systems are in place to try to address these different concerns, all important, of our water in the state of Florida. So what you're saying is, on algal blooms and the pictures we would see of a place I was frolicking when I was a child that now has yucky stuff on it, on the top at various times of year, that would be a water quality issue. That is what is called BMAP, which stands for Basin Management Action Plan, which are promulgated, reviewed, and enforced by the Department of Environmental
Yes,
Protection.
and I'll yield to Tom Frick is an expert in that. So if I misstate
No,
anything,
right.
jump in, Tom. But yeah, that is really how they tackle the water quality issue in the springs. And I don't know if Tom would have anything else to add. Okay.
And then if that in the BMAP process should suss out that because certain nutrients are at a certain level that are being introduced, that then triggers a bloom. Whereas if those levels were not that high, a bloom would not be triggered, correct? In very simplistic terms.
Right. And
Right.
we do look at the one part of the algal issue that we do look at is what we call algal scour, which is where, there's algae attached to some of the plant life. And Eric, I'm lawyer getting into environmental science, but
I do it all the time.
but basically we need one of the things we do look at is there needs to be enough flow out of the spring to scour the algae off that plant life. So that's the one part where we would look at it, but it's
Right.
much different than the DEP look.
Understood. All right, you're recognized, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you for those questions. But I want to ask Mary Ellen about, calibration of those models that you use. First of all, what is the level of accuracy, and do we do periodic, the real live test against the model to make sure that, we're getting good data? Because, those data entry are done by humans, right?
Correct. Yes, actually, thank you for mentioning that. That is something that we do, and it involves a lot of time and effort from our staff. We do have calibration targets. Yes. And there's basically when these models are done, we go into it with, we want to achieve these targets like a plus or minus within a set range. And so we work to achieve that calibration. And so we actually did also, when the larger model, the ECFTX model was done, we did that work, and we actually also did some recalibration work in this Wekiva Basin area to make sure we were getting it right. So that, your great point, we definitely, that is very important to us. And so all of our models, we now have basically 3 models for our district. There's one in this Central Florida area. We also have one in our Central Springs, kind of Volusia County, Marion County, and then we have our North Florida. So each of those models goes through a very extensive calibration process. We also do peer review. So it's because big decisions, lots of money for folks rely on these models. So there's a lot of time and energy spent to get them right.
Is your peer review includes environmental communities?
So we peer review the groundwater model. That work is peer reviewed. We also, each of our MFLs, and then this one we've made this determination also goes through a peer review process. So it's not just staff that comes up with numbers and we're off and running. No, we develop what we think the answers are, and then we go through a peer review where we get outside consultants to review our work to make sure that we've done it right. And then if they have comments, we'll respond to those
Who are
comments.
the peer reviewers?
I don't recall the name, and John,
Is it local government? Is it environmental
it's
communities?
environmental. Basically, we go through a process. It has to be folks that have the requisite skills to do it. So we have consultants that do that for us. And Barnes Furland is the one for this particular MFL. They could be different depending on the MFL.
Yeah, but I'd like to know who are the peers.
Barnes Furland is the
But
firm.
that's just a consultant.
Firm,
You
yes.
pay them to review us.
That is correct. That is correct.
I don't know why I have a problem with that. We pay them.
Well, we
do what I
also,
want.
there is a process too where we will, as we get further in the process, we workshop our MFL so that we have an opportunity for the public to also comment. That is part of the process. So we have our technical peer review, and then, during the rulemaking process and
So
before.
you do public.
Oh, yes,
you do
ma'am.
public events, and you do.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
people show up, media show up, environmental. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
The model calibration is really critical to what we do, Mary Ellen. I can't focus enough on that
Yes, ma'am.
because I've seen it. Like we struggled at St. John's Water Management to development of these models a couple of years ago. So are we happy with the end result?
Yes, ma'am. We've started with ECFT, and actually even before that, we had an ECF model. Model development, it's, you go generations, and so we're pleased with where we are now. We are always going to be fine tuning as we get more data. One of the things was the Central Florida Water Initiative that I think we talked about back in March when we had a briefing. One element of that work is what's called the DMIT team. It's a data team that has recommended some additional monitoring sites. So as we get more data in for those areas where we thought, we don't have enough data, we'd like to have more in that particular spot, that data over time will be incorporated. And so none of our models are static. They're always being improved as we get more data and can calibrate against that data. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, you're recognized. Just a couple of follow-up comments. Let's make sure the light shows, yep, and then we'll.
It's supposed to be. There it is. Okay.
We have new ones of these
I know,
for
I'm
everybody, and we
technically
actually.
challenged over
No,
here.
not at all. This one, unlike the other one, which was strangely confusing.
It was.
Is when you push it, the green light really comes on, and when you push it again, the green light really goes off. And when the green light's on, everybody can hear you. And the other one had all kinds of
It
strange
was weird.
permutations
Weird.
and all that. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Anyway,
I
so
recognize.
now we're good. Now we're good. But just a couple of follow-up comments touching on the challenges, and I speak from experience here, of following the BMAP process as well as the MFL process. And I can clearly remember my own experiences, and I'll reflect that back to the public who might not necessarily have the background to really get into it. But you've got two separate statutes and two separate agencies, and you've got the nutrient standard, and you've got the impaired waters determination process, which is an ongoing process, and that triggers, if it's impaired, a BMAP, the development of an improvement plan to address the impairment. It takes a lot to keep up with that. On the other side, you've got what the district does, which is the MFL process, which is designed to make sure there's water there for everything, both to protect the resource as well as to supply what's needed to support what Florida does and what makes Florida a great place for people to come and live and recreate here. I think a lot of times the algae thing, you hit on it, it gets stuck over here with the supply issue. And that's really not where the laws and our regulations have headed us. We've got two different agencies with two different big responsibilities. There's a great deal of collaboration, and I can appreciate that, but I can also appreciate the struggle in the minds of the public who either can't or really doesn't care about all that technical stuff, to just try to have what they want, you know, and what they can appreciate, and to protect Florida's resources. So anything we can do to help bridge those gaps, which you touched on there, as I think is productive and helpful. And I'll just leave it that the agencies do work together closely. A lot of this is shared data. Most of it's out there, if not all of it. If you want to dive off and be a water quality modeler or a groundwater modeler, you can do that. Not everybody wants to do that because it's hard. But it's there, and we, I think, have to just recognize that part of our job is to translate all of that into things that people can understand. And it's an ongoing challenge.
Yes,
It
ma'am.
really is.
Yep.
And to piggyback on both of your comments, and some of what I was saying earlier, we all love our springs here in this room. I think 95% of Floridians love their springs, right? And we want to do what we can to protect them. And so you set up these, and I say springs, and that this would apply to lakes and everything else. And so we set up these models, DEP and Water Management District are to review to make sure there's enough water flow, to make sure the nutrient levels or whatever. And if the data, just objective data, shows that we're actually okay in a certain area, but you're seeing certain bad things happen, it makes the public or people who have interest and maybe not fully 360 view of the data say, well, the system's wrong, or people are ignoring what's happening, or anything, or various things. And that's why it's very, but what is very important to understand is if the data produces an outcome that isn't scientifically rigorous, that says there's a problem when a problem actually doesn't exist, or it isn't nearly as bad as it would be described by other people. These laws do more than just create an argument in the public about how we should do data and all these. It means that you're now spending $1 billion of taxpayer money, which would normally go to schools, or maybe normally go to another water project that you really care about, to address what this data is requiring the government to do now, because it's in a state of recovery. When perhaps if you just look closer at the data, someone would argue you're actually not in recovery under the law. You're in preservation, or whatever the category is, which doesn't require that $1 billion being spent. All right? So it's very important that we are rigorous and honest about what exactly is causing these things that we are concerned about, and what exactly can prevent bad things from happening. Because we've got these rules set up, and if you aren't rigorous about that, you will then produce bills that taxpayers have to pay, and those bills are not cheap. We just did a project that's going to be $90 to $100 million. Do you know what your local school district could do with that? All right, but we have a law that requires us to spend that, right? So we better make sure this is right, and so I think that's important that we be very clear-eyed in these discussions. And that's why I enjoyed our discussion with Dr. Marzoff earlier about, the skies falling over SAVs. Well, it is a problem, but it was a problem in 1825 when they had 3 hurricanes in 4 years, and the water went up, and the water had tanning in it, and the grass died, and then the manatees who were existing in 1825 got really hungry, right? And that wasn't man-made. That was Mother Nature. And that's the question The question is, what is man-made and what can we do to fix our contribution to it? And what is life? And what is Mother Nature, and what is the circle of life? Because nature is very cruel left to her own devices too. Okay? Man isn't the only cruel factor in this world. And we need to be mindful of what is happening that's going to happen anyway, and what is happening because of us, because these are very expensive determinations.
So, to your point, Chair, so we have, kind of going back, we do know that we need to do more work here. This is a case where if we don't do anything, we would go negative. But I also didn't want to leave the impression that we have done nothing while we were doing this work. Both in 2015 and again in 2020, the Central Florida Water Initiative, with the support of the board, adopted regional water supply plans. And those plans include projects that if the local utilities and others do those projects, we can not go negative. And so, interestingly enough, the way water supply planning actually has a linkage to Chapter 163, which is that local government planning process. So what's going to happen again at the end of this year in 2025, if you all approve the plan that you'll consider later this year, is we will send letters out to all of those utilities and other entities that are in the plan where a project has been identified for them, and they will be provided notice. And again, actions have consequences. And they will have 18 months to choose projects from that list, or they can let us know another project that they have that would address their impacts. But they have, under the water supply planning, they have to update their facilities plan, their local facilities work plan, to incorporate projects to demonstrate that they will have water supply for the next 10 years. And so as a result, you can see the spending. This is just our district, not the other districts. But since 2011, we've had 92 projects, 114 million gallons per day made available from reclaimed water and other alternative water supplies. Our district has funded those projects in the Central Florida Water Initiative area to the tune of $35.7 million, with a total project cost of over $200 million. So, while we're at that sustainable yield point, we've probably bought ourselves some time by implementing these projects, and to the chair's point, at some expense to date already. In addition to these projects, in 2021, we were directed, along with the Department of Environmental Protection, the Water Management Districts, DEP adopted rules as directed by statute to address water issues in the Central Florida Water Initiative area. And one of those key points is that upper Floridan quantities have been limited to everyone's 2025 demands. So for example, Castleberry, which you saw last month, their allocation was decreased 12% from 7 MGD down to 6 MGD. In addition to that, their upper Floridan withdrawal quantities were limited to about 4.2, 4.5, somewhere in that, but limited to in the 4 MGD range. So that means they're going to be having to get their other quantities that they need from the lower Floridan. And the reason we're encouraging lower Floridan, it's not as much of an impact to the spring. So the upper Floridan is more connected, and so those upper Floridan quantities impact the spring more. So Castleberry is moving those quantities essentially down and further away. The rules also had requirements related to water conservation. So since those rules have been implemented, we have modified, I believe it's over 105 permits to implement these rules. So staff has been busy making those adjustments. It's not just public supply that was addressed, ag, landscape, recreation uses, institutional, commercial. Each of them had requirements that had to be added. So again, those are things that have been implemented. So we're not sitting by doing nothing while we worked on the reevaluation. The other thing that we often hear is that don't issue new water, don't issue new permits. I wanted to share that in our district, since 2015, we've decreased overall groundwater sources 4.7 MGD. Those upper Floridan quantities, we've decreased 15.6 MGD. You'll see lower Floridan has increased, but again, that is by design to help lessen and blunt the impacts. In terms of new permits, in all of 2024, we had 1 new CUP in this area. Basically, whoever has water has it. Generally, we were averaging about 5 new permits a year in this area, but it's very small. There's not a lot of new water use. What we are seeing, of course, is more pressure on utilities that are already existing, and so their need for water would be increasing. So not new folks to the picture, but folks that are there that need more supply.
And I think it's worth noting that, you know, people say, well, the utilities can wear a black hat in this sometimes because they're such vociferous users of water. They are us. That's us using the water. They're the people you pay the bill to every month. All right? So understand that you can't just say let the utilities pay for it, because that's the same as you paying for it. That means your bill goes up just like your tax bill would go up. Your water bill will go up. So when I look at utilities, and this is Rob Rowley talking, in the world of who is to bear cost of X, Y, and Z in these things, it is not someone else's money and therefore free to us. It is our money, just someone else who has our money. The district has your money, the utilities have your money, right? And so we need to be as mindful of the requirements we put on the utilities as we are as the requirements we put on ourselves for these projects, because we're all paying for it.
So just wanted to share that again, I think with the projects that we've put into place over the last decade and the $200 million worth of projects in our district, we are seeing, obviously, we all have seen it, continued growth in population, but our water uses, it goes up and down, but it has been fairly stable. We're averaging, over the last 20 years, about 275 MGD a day in our district. But again, we'll have ups and downs, but fairly stable water use. Wanted to touch on, I've talked about the regional water supply plan, that the third generation of which you'll see later this year. We've talked about the rule, but we are required, because we are recommending to the board that we call it recovery. That means that we do need to have an implementation strategy. And so it's kind of, what else can we do for the system to make sure, again, that we don't go negative in the future. A couple of important points about strategies. We do have an obligation, I think Ms. Price made the point earlier, that while we're in this process, we do need to provide supply for existing and projected reasonable beneficial uses. So we are required to provide water while we're in this period. The other important point is the last sentence is that we can't depend solely on water shortage restrictions as a way to meet our obligation. Really, water shortage is a tool in the toolbox for drought, and we can't just rely on that. We need to look at projects, alternative water supply, conservation to meet our needs. So that's an important point as well. I also, again, wanted to point out this is an OFS spring, so by statute, there are additional requirements that are going to apply to Rock and Wakaiwa. And that includes listing of projects, priority listing, but the one of key significance to our district is this 25% cost. Because it is these are OFS springs, we are mandated by statute to cover 25% of the project costs for whatever project is selected to help prevent us from going negative. So it does have a fiscal impact to the district. What we're working on now, we began in April of this year a collaborative effort with some of the larger utilities in the area, with the other water management districts as well, participating to look at what are some large, more regional scale projects that we could implement to address that potential future negative, to prevent that from happening, and to make sure we have water out into the future. That work is going on now, and we anticipate that that will be brought in for a landing in April of 2026. In addition, and thank you to the board again for your support and approval of the Taylor Creek Reservoir design effort that started in March with your approval. Just wanted to list for you some of the important milestones that are upcoming on that project. That project is designed to provide 54 million gallons a day of alternative water supply to the Central Florida area. So that's happening, again, with your support. And this is just an example. We're also working with our agricultural community. This is an example of Cherry Lake Tree Farm. He's done outstanding work, more than 1.3 million gallons per day, conserved. So again, working with all of our communities. And last but not least, and I appreciate your patience. I know I've gone long. I apologize for that.
We're the ones who made you go long.
Yeah. But
this has been great for me anyway. I hope that others.
This is our scheduled kind of path forward. We are working on that conceptual regional project development and also outreach to stakeholders over the next year. So we anticipate a workshop on MFLs and implementation strategy about a little over a year from now, and then hoping to bring this an implementation strategy to you for consideration towards the end of next year. And so with that, I'm happy to entertain any other questions you might have.
Well, I know it was brought up earlier about the idea of sort of including perhaps interests, whatever they may be, on any side of the spectrum on the decisions that are made with regards to MFLs. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's true, of course, right, that not only are there public points of input, there's points in the process where the public can provide input, data, whatever, their own data, whatever it may be, correct?
Correct.
Right.
There will be points in the process for that, workshops, and we also invite people we've reached out to some of the stakeholders just to talk it through, because we know a lot of the interested stakeholders, we appreciate the input. And it's sort of the relationship we have had with our friends at Brooklyn and Geneva. We would love to have that same relationship with our friends down in the Central Florida area as well.
Right. And let's say I'm an advocacy group that has some means, they do exist. I mean, if I go participate, provide data, and the outcome is still not to my liking, there are administrative procedures and so forth that one can take, correct?
Yes, sir. We hope to avoid those, but yes, sir, there are.
And which is one of our, we have motivation to, because that takes time, effort, taxpayer money and all that. We don't like to litigate any more than, no one likes to litigate. It's annoying, time consuming, and stressful. But I guess the point is we've been challenged before.
Yes, sir.
And we carried the day, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so they have an opportunity, they being those who would think that we're not being tough enough, quote unquote, and they can have their day in court.
Yes.
And we're proud to stand and defend our position, which is, I will point out that I'm old enough to remember during the time when those things are being filed, those things are being said. There was a deluge of articles over several years about how we're not protecting the springs and we're being too weak and we're just not doing enough. And then when the rubber hit the road and the data was actually exposed and challenged and gone through the proper procedures, it was not only defensible, we were right? And so that, don't believe everything. Just be mindful of critiques, and make your decisions after truly reviewing and listening to all sides in the matter, and understanding that this district is doing our dead level best to play it down the middle objectively and fair and produce a result that is based on reason and science. Yes. You're recognized.
Thank you.
Great work, as always. We're very, very blessed. You, Mr. Register, Mr. Jenkins, Eric, Brad, Sam. I mean, and I didn't deliberately, if I happened to not say somebody's name, it was not, I just happened to look up and see my friends right in front of me there. The whole team, mentioned or not mentioned, thank you. Great work. Very complicated stuff. And I feel like, we can always be better, but we do our best to get it right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, you're right.
But I was remiss in recognizing the staff that helped prepare that presentation. So did want to acknowledge Clay Corsi, John Fitzgerald, Andrew Sutherland, and Callie Register, who really provided immense support. So just wanted to recognize them.
Well, thank you, and thank you for responding to our request to really do a deep dive on all of that. It was quite helpful for me. I hope it was helpful for everyone. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we move on?
I got a comment.
Yes, sir.
Can you go to the very last slide of Waikaiva Spring Head that you had up? I make a point of trying to get out to other areas, and I've been trying to get to all the springs. I've kayaked Blue Springs, the springs in Gainesville, Ishitukne. I go Rock Springs 6 times a year. I do Waikaiva spring run probably 5 times a year. I try to get a feel for the health and the well-being of the springs that we look over. And right there, that what bothered me most recently in the last 25 years that I've been doing this, of running these springs in a kayak at 8 in the morning for about 5 to 7 miles each way, is the big mega mansions that were built just to the left of this picture that refuse to get off their septic tanks for years and years. With the Indian River Lagoon, we found out septic tanks are death to the grass beds of the Indian River Lagoon all around Vero Beach to Cocoa to Merritt Island. Septic tanks are killing the grass beds of the Indian River Lagoon. And I've watched the deterioration once those mansions and big houses were built just within 300, 500 yards of that beautiful spring. And all of them were on septic tanks with their Home Depot lawns and fertilizer just pouring it to the springs. And I've watched the algae increase from this all the way down to Waikaiva Island. It used to be 25 years ago, it was crystal clear and there wasn't any black gross growth on the grasses. And now it's all the way down to Waikaiva Island. So I think as important as MFLs are, getting everybody off of septic tanks, it's creating a mess. And it's such an unbelievable resource. We're so lucky to have these springs. I just can't stress it, knowing the decline in the Indian River Lagoon and the Banana River, Mosquito River, and in the Indian River Lagoon itself because of septic tanks. We need to get it out of every spring head we can.
Well, it costs money, right?
It does.
And
Lots of it.
and it goes back to our earlier discussion about, we're going to be spending a lot of money on MFLs as a society.
Yeah.
It's not just the district. We've decided to do this, the system, right? And if algal blooms are being, if we're dealing with MFLs at the expense of algal blooms, then we need to, because we didn't get the MFLs right,
Right.
and we overshot it to be on the safe side, quote unquote, and then spend $1 billion for a recovery that, at the end of the day, no one's life changes really measurably one way or the other. But the algal blooms are continuing on because we haven't fixed the septic.
Yep.
I mean, that's
Which is the nutrient rule, which is
Because
another
of the
agency, which is like, kill
Right.
me now. It's so confusing. But that is our system, and
Yes.
and it does work, but it takes a lot of time.
Yep.
exactly.
It's only money.
No doubt. All right. We're going to move to item 7.
We do have public comment on
Oh,
this.
great. Okay. Yes.
First up, I'll give Mary Ellen's voice a chance to recover there. Anita Henry with Friends of Wakaiva River.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman and the board, for having us here today. I'm a member of Friends of the Wakaiva River, and I would like to give you some of the background on the Friends of the Wakaiva, in case you're not familiar with it. The Friends started as a grassroots organization in 1981-82. What alerted the residents living along the Wakaiva River was all this organic matter floating down. Turns out there was an orange juice processing plant in the south end of the Little Wakaiva that was dumping its pulp into the river as it squeezed the orange juice. The concerned citizens got together, formed this organization, and have been active in many areas ever since. Our mission statement says to preserve, protect, and restore the Wakaiva River system. And Friends has used this statement to evaluate when and where to get involved. You've just seen a slide, and I'm not going to go over it again, but on the designations that have been given to this river, it is a very important river for the state of Florida, and they have put aside many policies to help protect it. And along with that came like the Wakaiva Protection Act of 1988. The Friends of Wakaiva were involved in the legislature in getting this promoted. They even took Bob Martinez, who was the then governor, for a canoe ride down the river. Well, the legislature voted unanimously to have this bill, and Martinez put it into law, made it into law. And it does put teeth into what we try to do, because they've seen it as being so valuable. Then another thing that they've done in 2004, when there was a major road to come through the Wakaiva Basin to connect with I-4 and to circumvent I-4, The Wekiva Parkway Protection Act was enacted, and Florida was an advocate in having this done. One of our board members, Nancy Prine, was very, very active in this, and it was important because of all of its protection that the bridge be aesthetically pleasing, and that underneath the road was built a passage for the animals to move between the Ocala forest and Wekiva. Some of the other things that we have done along the way, in 2000, PBS published our film, Wekiva Legacy or Lost, and this was produced by members on the board of the Wekiva, Friends of the Wekiva, and backed by us. The other things we do is monitor the development in the Wekiva Basin Conservation Area to make sure that it is in compliance with how this very sensitive area is developed. We do things in education, experientially, like having field trips and paddles down the river. And this gets our citizens out and a chance to actually fall in love with our basin and have a desire to protect it and be aware of what's happening. One of our most effective tools for reaching the public is our newsletter, which includes what we're doing and also suggests ways that they can become involved with us and learning how to protect the river itself, the basin itself. But it seems that our work has become more intense over the past few years. The population in our area, as you know, just continues to explode, and the pressure on the environment feels this also. And we feel the sense of losing habitat and ground surface for water to go into. But, and the hidden truth of the decline of our springs has become visually evident. And I think you all have talked about that, about the slime going down the river. It's just scary to see that. But Friends of the Wekiva will continue in its efforts to preserve, protect, and restore the Wekiva River in its basin. And that's my part. Thank you.
Next up, Mike Clyburn with Friends of Wekiva River.
Thank you. Friends of the Wekiva River does support what the Water Management District is doing to protect the water resources and the ecosystem of the Wekiva Basin. We are appreciative that the staff has reached out to us to review and comment on the MFL report. Our concerns are related mainly to the recovery plan, so we're trying to be proactive in looking ahead, because the next step is going to be a recovery plan to make sure that the minimum flows and levels are maintained. And we have our board has passed a resolution that we want to, Mr. Humphreys is going to read that into the record, but our main concerns are that the recovery plans, and the state law allows up to 20 years for the recovery plans to achieve the MFL. And we know that these large projects like Taylor Creek can take years to develop. I know it's been going on at least since 2007. And so we're concerned about the length of time it will take to recover the minimum flows and levels in the Wekiva River system. And we're asking the board to accelerate that schedule. We can't imagine that it taking 20 years before for the Wekiva River not to meet its minimum flows and levels. The other thing we know is that the Water Management District is continuing to issue permits for irrigation, for landscape recreation, for agriculture, for commercial, industrial, and institutional irrigation. Since the aquifer is already under stress, we are concerned that having additional straws into the aquifer, even though most of these are small amounts, that's adding more stress to the aquifer. And so we're asking for a moratorium on new pumping from the aquifer. And we also know that the utilities under the rules can request a temporary allocation beyond that 20 years. If they're working on a project and need more time, they can even request an extension and may continue to pump from the aquifer even beyond the 20-year time frame. So we're concerned that the Wekiva River might not meet its minimum flows and levels for a period of 20 years or maybe even more. So that's going to be part of the resolution that we're going to read to you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Next up, Jay Exum, or Exum.
Good morning, or I think it's still good morning. Mary Ellen's presentation did a good job of addressing some of the water resource values that I was going to talk about. It's okay. We're
So, good afternoon.
good
It's noon.
afternoon. Thank you for the context. Well, and Mr. Chairman, you asked questions of Mary Ellen's presentation that may make some of what I say a little bit redundant, but I try not to be redundant and maybe be supportive a little bit as I talk about ecological relevance of the MFLs. I do want to say that the draft MFL report determined that biologically meaningful changes to the flow regime are currently ongoing. So that is a part of the context of the MFL. 2 flow-related metrics were determined to be the most constraining or most impactful if they are not achieved. Periodic flooding is called frequent highs in the MFL, and minimum water levels, or minimum average, as it's called in the MFLs. And talk about the periodic flooding for a second. If the objectives for periodic flooding are met, Wekiva floodplain swamps would be inundated for 1 or 2 months a year during the rainy season, and fish and other organisms forage and seek refuge in the inundated floodplains. Wetland vegetation is sustained. Plants and microbes absorb nitrogen and improve water quality. So to address the water resource, this periodic flooding would address those water resource values that Mary Ellen talked about. The MFL report also determined that certain minimum water levels needed to be sustained to prevent excessive drying of deep organic soils in the river floodplain. If that happens, if those minimum water levels are achieved, tree roots are covered by soil since there's no subsidence. Floodplain trees are therefore more stable. Intermittent ponding occurs across lower elevations of the floodplain. Carbon and nutrients are sequestered. Because of the Water Management District's MFL report determined that current flows and levels do not meet the current MFLs, it is likely that ongoing significant harm is continuing to water resources in the basin. Consequently, some of the water resource values that I talked about in that list that Mary Ellen showed on that long slide are being compromised, and therefore wetlands, floodplains, and aquatic habitats are being impacted. I want to reiterate what Mike said. We are generally pleased with the recommended elevations and criteria in the MFL report, and we're more than satisfied with the way that staff collaborated with us and our opportunities to comment. So we are good with where we are. We just like to make sure that the Water Management District takes an aggressive approach to restoring and protect the river in the event that MFLs are not sustained. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Joseph Humphreys with Friends of Wekiva River.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you very much for this time. Based on the information.
Glad you're here. Welcome.
Based on the information that you've heard, again, we are all very closely related to the rivers across the state, and have worked very closely with some of our past leaders up to including Governor Bush. He's been very, very interested in this particular area. But based on all the information, we appreciate all of the efforts of staff. But based on that, the board of the Friends of Wekiva Rivers on June 5th, 2025, drafted a resolution for your presentation. Whereas the St. Johns River Water Management District has determined that the Wekiva River system does not meet the minimum flows and levels necessary to protect the ecosystem because of excessive groundwater pumping, and therefore the Wekiva system is in recovery. 2, the Wekiva River System MFL Recovery Plan may require, as Mike mentioned, 20 years to implement and achieve the recommended MFLs in the Wekiva River System. Thirdly, the United States Congress has designated, as you heard, the Wekiva River as a wild and scenic river. And 4, the Florida legislature has designated Wekiva and Rock Springs as outstanding Florida springs and portions of the Wekiva River as outstanding Florida waters and an aquatic preserve. Therefore, it is resolved that the Friends of the Wekiva River hereby request that the district impose a moratorium on all new and additional withdrawals of groundwater from the Florida aquifer within the Wekiva River spring shed as identified in Figure 31 of the district's draft Wekiva River MFL's reevaluation report. This moratorium should remain in place until the projects identified in the Wekiva River System MFL recovery plan are implemented and there is quantitative evidence that groundwater pumping is offset or reduced to the average quantities pumped during the MFL target period of 2014 to 2018. And B, because of the current overpumping of groundwater from the Florida aquifer in the Wekiva River spring shed, the Friends of Wekiva River request that the district adopt measures within the Wekiva River spring shed to offset or reduce the overpumping of groundwater within the Wekiva spring shed by 2034. In addition, the Friends of the Wekiva River request that the district continuously monitor flows in Palm Springs in Seminole County, Florida, and implement Phase 1 water shortage rules when the flow from the spring is less than the recommended MFL for Palm Springs, as defined by the draft Wekiva River MFL's reevaluation report for a continuous period of 180 days. In addition, the Friends of the Wekiva River request the river system MFL recovery plan require the district to implement Phase 2 water shortage orders when the water levels and flows in Wekiva or Rock Springs or the Wekiva River at State Road 46 do not comply with the duration and return intervals for frequent high water levels or minimum average flows as defined in the draft Wekiva River MFL's reevaluation report. The Wekiva River System MFL recovery plan should require increasingly more restrictive phases of the water shortage orders if the frequent high water levels or minimum average flows continuing to fall short of the metrics defined in the draft Wekiva River MFL's reevaluation report. This resolution was approved by the Board of Directors, Friends of Wekiva, as I said, June 5th of 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we appreciate all of y'all. Is that everybody? Oh, we got more, which is great. I want to hear that. It's been very good presentation so far. Go ahead.
Next up is Chris Farrell with Audubon, Florida.
Oh, we couldn't go without Chris. That's it. But we thank the Friends for being here today. Appreciate it. You recognize Chris.
Thank you. Chris Farrell, Audubon, Florida. Thanks for having this discussion today. These are, critical issues. Water's so fundamental to the ecology of Florida. That's why Audubon, Florida, even though everybody associates us with birds, a large amount of the advocacy and policy work we do is centered around water because it, provides the habitats and ecosystems that support birds and all of our other wildlife. I just wanted to throw out a few things here related to this discussion to consider. First, really quickly, there is a distinction between what y'all are responsible for and what DEP is responsible for, and Florida law has quality and quantity separate, and that's actually a point of frustration. So many water management actions and things that are happening in our environment, there is not this real, they're so intertwined. Things that affect quality affect quantity, vice versa. I appreciate the efforts of your staff to try to cross that bridge and work together. But that is something that we should constantly strive to do, is think about the repercussions of our management actions on both of those items. Another thing that's I'd say funny or frustrating or whatever, but I've worked on over the years dealing with MFLs in specific. Mary Ellen had a slide up there, and when you, Chair Bradley, were kind of recapping it, you said, "Oh, we're preventing harm to systems," And technically, to point out what her slide said, was significant harm. And this is where most people go, what's the difference? And unfortunately, a lot of us have had to have a lot of conversations about what this means. And in general, like our MFL rules are preventing against significant harm, which is it's some level of harm that occurs for a certain amount of time, certain durations, and then comes back with certain frequencies that we say we're really going to do damage that would take a long time for the system to recover from. And that is a really tricky exercise. You know, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes of having to come up with what exactly parameters we're looking at and what numbers, and we're always fighting about what that looks like. And I think my main message on this is that we are talking about this significant harm and not just harm, and that we really shouldn't use that. If we use that as the line that we're trying to stay right above, that could be really dangerous, that we could be constantly dipping below it. And so it's caution. We should make sure that we're making plans that give ourselves room, some breathing room, that we're not right at that level. And I'll go quickly here. A related concept is anything above that, the freeboard we have above that, sometimes gets interpreted as water we have available to use. But for the reasons I just explained, we don't want to be right at that critical threshold. And an analogous situation, I think, this is common throughout many environmental laws. We have a lot of priorities, and I totally get, you know, we have to juggle all of the things that are important to society against one another. But when we're doing that, I want to make sure that we're clear what it is we're getting or what we're sacrificing. And like our endangered species laws, we have a handful that a lot of us working on this could just name in a few seconds of the endangered species that we actually protect. But there are tons and tons of species that are declining and working their way towards being endangered. Fish and Wildlife Conservation, they have a statewide action plan, and they, in the 2019 version, they narrowed their list down to 690 species in Florida that will head towards extinction if we don't take action to prevent them. And the reason they narrowed it down to 690 was because they felt the larger number before that was too much to try to help guide management decisions of agencies and dollars. So I'm just making the point that the MFLs are protective of really bad situations that we don't want to have happen, but we really should give them a little room to breathe to protect more of the environmental values that we're trying to protect. And I have many other comments, so I will have to wait for later, but thank you all very much for your time.
Well, we always appreciate your comments, and as anybody's seen any of these meetings, I don't stop everybody right at 3 because we want to make sure that it's more important that we hear everybody. Also, however, it's sort of a understanding that let's not go for 7 or 8 minutes either, or let's kind of wrap it up once you hit that 3-minute mark, and everybody did that. So thank you. Thank you.
One more.
All right, go ahead.
Vivian Katz James with
Oh, great.
What a difference. What I'm hearing on MFLs. Your discussion today, Mary Ellen, was absolutely spot on. I thank you for that. Just to hear the district really talking about MFLs and really working on them in advance is absolutely amazing. Okay, I'm sorry Ms. Giabi White is not here, because in December of 2010, okay, someone from this district stood up here and started talking about the MFLs for Lake Geneva and Lake Brooklyn. And they had what was called I think it's a TSR something or other staff report, okay, that was about this thick. The gentleman started talking, and Ms. Giabi said, "Have you talked to the people in Keystone about this yet?" And kind of deer in the headlights, okay? And I'm probably going to go over 3. I'll try not to. Deer in the headlights, he said, "No, well, we're going to be doing that next." What I've learned over 15 years is no, when the TSR is sitting here, it's done. because you guys have to have information, and you're not all scientists, okay? And so you count on that, all right? And so what I have seen over my years is fortunately, a tremendous positive change in staff and on the board, a willingness to work to do solutions-oriented meetings as opposed to fights, okay? In 2010, the MFL, and I'm using round numbers here, the 2010 MFL that was set in 1994 for Lake Brooklyn was somewhere around 105 elevation. In 2010, this gentleman standing here was going to lower it to 81, okay? And what we know is that Lake Brooklyn and Lake Geneva are one of the two major recharge areas for the Floridan aquifer. That's your drinking water and mine, okay? And so the utilities were saying, we're going to take this water, and it's like, let me get a knife and cut off my nose to spite my face, because they wanted to lower the aquifer. So the good news is, for us anyway, that on our board, we ended up with two gentlemen that came on our board, Dr. Pat Welch and Webb Farber, who had the expertise to take your information. We use your data probably 95% of the time, and we looked at it, and we kept working at it and working at it and working at it. So in 2021, we got an MFL of 106, okay? Just letting y'all know you may want to do more than proclamations. But what you have now, what we did not have, and what you have is a staff and a board that will work with you. So thank you.
Well, you brought in for a landing right at the buzzer. That was impressive. All right. Are there any, keep moving on, and I feel sorry for the folks who are like, well, I
That's all for that item.
Are those all the cards
For that item, yes.
for this item? I would love to hear other cards. That's not my point. I was apologizing for not waiting to make sure that all the cards were addressed. All right. We are now moving to item 7, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's where we are. Mr. Olson, you have a follow-up briefing on a previous presentation about prescribed burns. You're
Yes, sir.
recognized.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Olson. I serve as Program Manager in the Bureau of Land Resources, here today to give a follow-up presentation on our prescribed fire program with more information that was requested during last month's meeting. This presentation will include an update on our fire data dashboard, as well as looking at the relationship between our prescribed fire accomplishments and land acquisition history here at the district, as well as the cost of our prescribed fire program. Start with the dashboard. I showed a snip similar to this last month. Chairman Bradley, you asked if we could make this public. The answer is yes. We had to make some slight adjustments, removing staff names, things like that. But we're adding it to our website. Not only will the public be able to see overall accomplishments of the district's fire program, but they can interface with this dashboard and see accomplishments by county as well as by land management region.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And I was going to actually do one more request. First of all, thank you.
Okay.
Second of all, if we could add that slide to our hydrologic, and along with the well capping situation,
Okay.
that would be great, because this is an issue that the board cares about and very interested in. You're recognized.
Awesome. We appreciate that. I showed this slide last month showing our prescribed fire accomplishments through the years. This is 31 years of our program. You can see the trend lines going up, but the question is, are we keeping pace with the land acquisitions here at the district? So you can see a lot of lands that we are currently managing were purchased in the 80s and 90s. We're continuing to grow, but that rate has slowed somewhat since about the year 2000. As we're acquiring these lands, they have a variety of fire management needs. So everything from floodplain swamp there on the left, where no fire is needed at all, To scrub there in the middle, that needs one fire about every 5 to 20 years. And then you've got floodplain marsh there on the right, that needs fire every 2 to 4 years. This is the current state of our holdings as far as fire management goes. The red area in that chart is fire maintained ecosystem, so about 70% or 300,000 acres need fire at some interval. The green area in the chart, 134,000 acres, 31% does not need fire. That's a picture of Rice Creek there on the right, just a couple miles west of DHQ here. So to keep pace with what these fire-maintained natural communities need, we need to be burning 76,000 acres, or 18% of our holdings every year. That's to meet that ecological fire need. That's the natural rhythm of fire that these ecosystems evolved with. This chart shows how that ecological fire need has grown over the years, and indeed it has gone from about 35,000 acres back in 1993 to 76,000 acres approximately now. This chart also shows our prescribed fire accomplishments over the years, that's in green, as well as our wildfire acreage on district lands during that period. Note 1998, we weren't doing a lot of prescribed burning that year. It was mostly wildfires, and it kind of shows that even though this is a valuable tool, prescribed fire, it's not always possible if the weather does not line up. So some of the challenges that we're continuing to face are dealing with the wild and urban interface. That's continuing to be more and more of a problem, as well as backlog acres. So as we take these lands on in our management, a lot of them come in a pretty rough condition. And to show an example of that, these are some pictures of Mesic flatwoods in 3 different phases. So on the left there, that's flatwoods that are in rotation. This ecosystem should burn at least once every 4 years. And so that's kind of what we're aiming for. We'd love to keep all of our flatwoods in that condition if possible. Once they get beyond 5 years, about 5 to 8, they look like that picture in the middle, so starting to get a little more difficult to burn. Once they get to about 9 years since the last fire, they look like that picture on the right. And so those are much more difficult. We have to burn them very carefully, oftentimes in smaller bites, more crew, more equipment, things like that. So to help deal with this backlog issue, we have a backlog reduction goal. And so the red line in this chart is our ecological fire need. That's on top there. It's about 18% of our holdings. Cut that in half, and that's the backlog reduction goal in yellow. And so as long as we're able to keep above that yellow line, we're really reducing our backlog acres, taking care of that problem. If we're below that yellow line consistently, our backlog acres will remain or increase. So how are we doing? The blue dotted line is our year-to-year data, and this is adjusted for the acreage managed by year. So it accounts for the fact that we're managing more acres now than we were back in 1993. You can see that the trend line that's in solid blue is positive, so we are gaining on it slightly, but it is a pretty flat line there. Also of note, we've exceeded that backlog reduction goal 7 times over the past 31 years. And so we'd love to get that above the yellow line consistently. We've got more work to do. To help with this issue, we use fire surrogates, things like timber harvest, mulch mowing, cattle leases, selective herbicides, and so that's helping to reduce the fuels in these areas as well as restructure them. It's not a replacement for fire, but it does help make reintroduction of fire easier. All right, so jumping next to the cost of our fire program, our annual averages range from $20 to $57 per acre. That's over the past 5 years. Major expenses include equipment purchases and upkeep, as well as internal and contractor costs for fire line prep and burn implementation. Note many of these costs are sunk costs, so things like equipment purchases, fire line prep, those are done whether the burn weather lines up or not. And so if we have a season where the weather doesn't really cooperate, we burn few acres, that cost is spread over fewer acres, kind of driving that cost per acre up. And to show some examples of how variable some of our burns are, these are two actual burns that happened earlier this year. The one on the left is a large aerial ignition burn, 8,800 acres that we pulled off in a day, and that cost about $3 an acre. Compare that with one of our smaller burns that we've done this year, small ground ignition burn, 15 acres. It was right up against private property, had rough fuels on us as well as rough fuels next door. All right. And so that one costs $400 an acre. Both of these are very important burns, just, you know, they have different price points. So I'll leave you with some prescribed fire scenes from our La Calusa Wildlife Conservation Area. This is 10,000 acres that we manage in Alachua County. We've been managing this area for about 30 years now, and a lot of backlog acres in here to begin with. And so we've been really ramping up our management using fire surrogates as well as increasing the fire frequency. The first 10 years that we were managing this area, we applied about 1,000 acres of fire. The second 10 years, we applied 3,000 acres of fire. And this past decade, we've been able to ramp that up to about 12,000 acres of fire applied. And so that's many repeat acres, you know, getting that fire frequency back up to what it's supposed to be. You can see these videos, some of these flames are pretty small. That's really what we want long term. If the fuels are managed the way they're supposed to be, it's not really exciting fires every time. And so really proud of our crews there for getting fire back on the landscape. So with that, any questions?
Any questions? Yes, sir. Mr. Oliver.
You know, just one question I would have is, you know, obviously those of us in Florida know that fire is a very important part of our natural cycle here. And we've also seen other areas of the country when that natural cycle is interrupted for, you know, a variety of reasons. So I'm concerned that we're continuing to fall below that yellow line. And what I would ask you and staff is not necessarily looking for an answer at this moment, but what can we as a board and an organization do to bend that line up so we can get above our bottom goal and try to move towards that 18%, which is optimal.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, so not looking for an answer today, but please, other than just more money, which, you know, obviously, and maybe what we have to do.
That's what it's going to be.
But,
and we'll just, when we do our budget, we would like to have that a part of the discussion.
I just think similar to our well capping program, we emphasize the importance of it, and we saw how much we moved the needle by putting in scope of some of the other projects we have limited resources. If we can move the needle on this item in the same way, I'd be appreciative of that.
Great.
And it's more important to get it right than to do more in this world, because this is literally life and death, what y'all are doing out there.
Yes, sir.
And bad things can happen. So just, we would love to grow it, and we'll talk about potential strategies, but we want to grow it smartly so that with each incremental expansion of it, that we don't sacrifice any or cut any corners on safety, because this is that's very serious stuff.
Yes, sir. Great. Thank you.
Item 8, Mr. Jenkins, update.
Mr. Chairman, board members, good afternoon. I don't have the privilege of addressing you that way very often. I'm happy to provide this monthly update on the construction progress for Crane Creek M1 Canal and Black Creek. Crane Creek M1 Canal, everything's done except for the 2 pump stations in the weir. You can see that they're at 99% complete, and that's just because we're waiting for the power to come in. We're very close to that. We're hoping that maybe by the end of this week or early next week that'll happen. Once the power is there, we need to test the pumps at the east and west pump station, and hopefully they work just fine. And if all goes according to plan, we're looking forward to this project being completed by the end of this month. Moving on to Black Creek, you can see that everything's complete except for the construction of the treatment system and production and delivery of the media. I'll give you a little bit of an update of all 6 cells. Cells 1 and 2 are completely filled with media, and the plants are in place. You can see that photograph in the lower left shows the plants thriving in cell 1. I'm also happy to report that we've run Black Creek water through both of those cells, and we've tested the effluent, and the water quality meets all the criteria in the MPDES permit. So we are ready to put water into Alligator Creek, which would eventually flow to Lake Brooklyn, but we got to have enough flow in Black Creek, and we don't. The extended period of dry weather has put the flow in Black Creek's below 25 CFS. So we're hoping that pretty soon the rains start coming. We're getting into that time of year. So as soon as that happens, we'll be ready. Moving on to cell number 3, everything's in place in cell number 3. It's ready for media, and it is getting media. It's about 65% filled right now with media. Sometime mid-July, we plan to, if things go according to plan on the production, it'll be filled by mid-July. So that will be done, and then they'll put the plants in cell 3. Cell 4 is all filled up with stone. The piping's in place, stone's in place, so that also will be at a level to where it will be ready to receive media when the time comes. You can see the middle photograph at the bottom. They're placing stone in cell number 4, and moving on to cells number 5 and 6. They're actively having the piping put in place. Now you can see, I'm going to refer to that photograph in the lower right, that's cell 4, but you can see 2 types of piping. There's this green piping here, and then it's hard to see because it's in a trench, and there's black piping here. So the green piping is where the water flows into a cell from Black Creek, and that's distributed evenly throughout the cell over the top of the media and filtrates down. The black pipe is where that treated water is collected after the nutrients and the color is removed. Then it flows into the black pipes and then eventually out to Alligator Creek. So right now in cells 5 and 6, they're putting the piping in place in those 2 cells. So that gets me to the end of the presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Doug.
Yeah, just a comment. If I were a dock builder, I would be going door to door in that upper chain of lakes saying, repair your docks now. The business should be booming for a dock builder. Just a comment.
Agreed. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Our next item is our regular public comment, and Ms. Winkler.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead.
We have several today. The first is Mr. Edward Cece.
Good afternoon. I have firsthand knowledge and experience of this district acting with a total disregard of its own rules. In 2005, the district put into full operation the Cedar Island stormwater system that was constructed to about half the size of the permitted design. Now, pertaining to overbuilding in violation of permit 70686-4, at the governing board meeting on September 12, 2023, governing board chairman Rob Bradley asked if they are complying with the law. Is there a scenario where the impervious surfaces that are allowed and built would not be sufficient? Executive Director Michael Register replied, they would be out of compliance with the permit because it only authorized a certain amount of impervious surface within the law. Now, 18 months later, I submitted uncontested evidence, which was the calculations prepared by the permittee's own engineer, and that was verified by the district's expert witness, that the impervious limit has been exceeded while there are still vacant lots to be built upon, and the district is doing nothing about it in violation of the law. relating to another matter of working without permits. The district has exhibited a blatant disregard for district rules and a blatant disregard for condition 13 of the permit. The district issued the equivalent of a construction permit to the permittee without an application being submitted, without a review process, without issuing a technical staff report, and without a notice of rights that would have afforded me the right to appeal. My rights have been violated. Of utmost significance is the cover-up by the district, intentionally hiding from me for 3 months its wrongful approval until after the construction and alteration work was commenced, thereby denying me the right to seek injunctive relief before the damage was done. The unlawful alteration construction work has caused an unsafe condition of steep slopes below the water level of the ponds as a result of work without permits, without plans, and without professional supervision. The stormwater system within Cedar Island must be restored to the original 2002 as-built condition that existed before the unlawful alteration construction work that the district unlawfully permitted. Thank you.
Mr. Timothy Mueller, representing the Cedar Island Homeowners Association.
The Cedar Island is a 32-lot residential community in Flagler Beach. I am currently the project manager of the community stormwater maintenance project, as well as representing the Cedar Island HOA as a board member. I would like to thank the district for their assistance while working with us towards bringing our stormwater system into compliance with our permit. As approved by the district, we are currently nearing completion of phase 1 of our maintenance project, which includes the detention ponds, related structures, and we'll be moving on to phase 2, which includes the review of the VNB shortly. The board has also taken proactive steps in minimizing further impervious impact by strongly encouraging owners to incorporate pervious surfaces and other mitigating features whenever feasible. The owners of the 4 most recent builds have followed these recommendations, having included pervious driveways in their construction, providing at least a 50% reduction in impervious numbers for those residents. We also have a resident that has included a 7,500-gallon cistern on his private residence, which captures about 90% of the rainfall that would impact his 2,000 square foot roof. That would be equal to about a 5-inch rainfall event. This water is then used to landscaping purposes such as a garden, lawn, things like that. I have noticed that Mr. Ceci has not mentioned anything about these mitigating things in his reports. On a side note, Mr. Ceci has repeatedly attempted to derail these efforts through lawsuit complaints and procedural roadblocks. He does not represent our 32-lot community, nor does he speak for the homeowners who are eager to see this resolved. His continued legal actions have prolonged this process and strained our resources. The Cedar Island HOA is focused on moving forward, working with the district, and managing our stormwater system responsibly. We appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Charles, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, Ruppel, also representing the Cedar Island Homeowners Association.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Ruppel, and I've lived in Cedar Island since the inception, at the very beginning. And I can say that we have never flooded. All those streets that are coming in to our development have flooded. And I agree with everything that Tim Mueller said. I think he's accurate. And I was told this morning that I was requested to speak, so I'm not really prepared for. But I'm telling you, I can say that we're nearing completion of the court-ordered pond maintenance project that brings the system in line with the original permit and submitting the necessary data from the as-built survey. Once successfully completed, we are preparing to apply for the amended permit. So in that process, the HOA has invested significantly financially and operationally to correct all the components and ensuring impervious impact is within the limits. And so that being said, that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Peggy Hill regarding Miller Pond.
Good afternoon. My name's Peggy Hill. I live on Miller Road in Orange City. We still have a problem in our area. I live on Miller Pond, which is also referred to as Miller Lake. Prior to Hurricane Milton, Miller Lake was overfull from a 2017 permit issued by your district. This permit was not followed by the permittee and not monitored. You can and should revoke this permit. With the lake already full, Hurricane Milton caused incredible flooding. As a small relief, Volusia County, for a short time, did some pumping to lower the water. The pumping was stopped as soon as the road was able to be reopened to 2 lanes. I want you to know that on more than one occasion, residents have been told that your district is the reason the pumping stopped and has not restarted. The borrow pit was temporarily full, and without an order from the district, the county cannot pump Miller Lake. It's been months since pumping was stopped, and nothing's been done to lower the lake. At its current extremely overfull water level, we won't need another hurricane to flood. A lot of rain will do it. More homes, roads, septics, and wildlife will be affected. Please allow Volusia County to continue to pump Miller Lake so we can survive the hurricane season, and please revoke the 2017 permit. Thank you for your time.
Mr. David Hill regarding Miller Lake.
Hello. My name is David Hill, and I'm here to talk about Miller Lake. My property used to be 300 feet from Miller Lake and is in flood zone X. My front yard started flooding in 2018 after St. John's Water Management issued a permit in 2017 to the Royal Oaks Professional Center. Ever since that pipe under Tremont Drive and the 3 drains on Tremont Drive were installed, our lake continued to rise. This permitted system is a pipeline for hundreds of acres of commercial property water runoff into Miller Lake. Since 2017, the Royal Oaks Professional Center system carried unpermitted water into Miller Lake. With this unpermitted water and the 2 hurricanes in 2024, Miller Lake is at the highest level that it has ever been. Why isn't St. John's Water Management helping us? All I see is more water being added with your approval of a recent permit. You have approved a recent permit that will add more water to Unnamed Lake. Unnamed Lake is what we call Lake Wawa. It's adjacent to Royal Oaks Professional Center. Any water that goes into that lake, it's just a matter of time before it moves into Miller Lake. And this property that you approved this permit for is 3/4 of a mile away from Miller Lake. So we're taking on water from other properties that could go somewhere else, or they could take care of their own water. This unnamed lake can't handle the water that is permitted for it now. All this water in Unnamed Lake will eventually go through Royal Oaks Professional System and into Miller Lake. The Royal Oaks Professional Center system has flooded land that hasn't seen water in my lifetime. How many more 100-year oak trees need to die? How many more acres of land need to flood? How many homes do you need to flood before you act and do something to help us? Why are you allowing an entire community to be turned into a retention pond? You need to stop this flow of water and help us get this water off our lands. I've been associated with Miller Lake since I was 15 years old. And 30 years ago, the water has just continued to rise, and it started with FDOT's retention pond. And I've seen the horse farm, the original stalls, go underwater. I've seen a home go underwater. If you don't stop this water from flowing into Miller Lake, you're going to turn our community into a retention pond. So I'm asking for your help and asking you all to stop the flow of water and get it out of there, or you're going to destroy an entire community. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chris Farrell, Audubon, Florida.
Chris Farrell, still with Audubon. I'd like to share a few comments on the CFWI water supply planning process that y'all will be getting to review a little later this year. We've submitted comments to the effort, and so your staff should have those, and we can make them available to the board. One issue I wanted to share today was that we think local governments who end up implementing the plans at the end of the day to make the water supply planning effort successful, that they could really benefit from some more of the expertise that the district has. And, in the planning effort, you do work to identify what the shortfalls are going to be in the future. And then the plan, I'd say it's maybe not a plan as much, it's a big list, and people can choose projects as they see fit, what makes sense for their community, what they can afford. There's various factors that go into it in order to meet their needs. And what we'd like to see is, so these projects, let me quickly mention, some of them are just good at doing water supply, and you could implement it and you meet your water supply goal. But there's a lot of opportunities, and y'all have done a lot of great projects that provide supply, clean water, help hold water and do stormwater management. So there's a lot of opportunities for these multi-benefit projects. But a lot of the projects that end up in the plan are, one-trick ponies, and sometimes they're doing it kind of at the expense of all the other goals that we're trying to achieve. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is we do have this separation between quality and quantity planning, and this is one of the casualties of that, where it's hard for projects that have multiple benefits. If you look at them holistically, they might be a super efficient way of spending taxpayer money and meeting all these needs and providing more benefits to everybody. But when you're just looking at quantity, in this case with water supply planning, if there's a project that can do that a little bit cheaper just to get that, that might be selected by a local government, and we miss out on the opportunity for a project might cost a little bit more but provide more benefits overall. So what we're asking for in the, I know, working on these over the years with staff, and they're like, we're limited in what we can do. We can't tell them what to do. We just, put this together according to the instructions we have in law of what we have to do. We would like to see just a little bit more information, some sharing this idea of the pros and cons of each approach, and thinking a little more widely about how, as you're implementing plans, here are some things to consider. Yes, supply is the number one thing that we're looking at in this plan, but there are different ways of getting at it, and some projects can also deliver a lot of other great benefits. And then maybe also on top of that, identifying ways if we get financial constraints where they're like, well, we just have to look at supply at this instance, and so maybe they're going to choose an inferior project. Are there ways we could get around that? So maybe just some more, the district taking a leadership kind of approach in the plan to saying, here are things we hope local governments would consider as they're implementing this. I know you do that one-on-one in meetings, but making that an element of the water supply plans, I think wouldn't violate anything or step beyond any authorities you have, and would just be helpful for local governments who don't engage on this as much as you in really thinking about the big picture. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, items 10 through 15 were approved on the consent agenda, so we're going to go to item 16. Ms. Preston, you're recognized for pending litigation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I have an update on one case and 3 new cases to report today. The update is an appeal. It's the case of independent construction of the Treasure Coast LLC versus several parties, including the district. This was a case that was dismissed by the trial court on the district's motion back in the fall of 2024. It involves foreclosure of a construction lien that involves property that's encumbered by a district regulatory conservation easement. The initial brief was filed on May 27th, and so now we are in the drafting process. The district's answer brief will be due June 26th. The first new case is Amber Boback versus Sun State Petrol 1 LLC, Circle K Stores Incorporated, and the district. This is a petition to challenge an environmental resource permit for a stormwater management system in Volusia County. It was initially filed on May 23rd. It's been amended since. We're now on the second amended petition, which was filed June 6th. And this second amended petition is under review. The next case is State Farm Florida Insurance Company versus the district. This case is in Marion County in small claims court. It involves a claim for property damage that's alleged after a motor vehicle incident involving a district vehicle that occurred in the fall of 2022. We received service of process on May 29th, and this is a case that Insurance Counsel has been assigned and is representing the district. The last new case is Orange County versus Jennings Investment LLC, several other parties, and the district. This is an eminent domain case in which Orange County is exercising its power of eminent domain to acquire property of all of the other parties. The district is named as a respondent because there's a stormwater drainage easement that affects the property, and the easement happens to list the district as the third-party beneficiary with a right to enter and inspect the stormwater area. So we've already been working with the county, and we expect to be able to resolve this case very soon. This concludes my report.
Any questions of Ms. Preston? All right, any governing board comments? Hearing none, I'm going to move to item 18, Executive Director's Report and Calendar. Mr. Register.
For my report today, I'm going to stick with the calendar where we will have our offices closed on Friday, July 4th in observance of the July 4th holiday. And the next governing board meeting is set for Tuesday, July 8th here at the district headquarters.
All right, is there any other business to come before the board today? Seeing or hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.